Good morning. It's August 1st, 2013, and we're here in Orange County, California, and we're here with Mr. Quach. And my name is Anna Marie Mallet, and please state your name.
My name is Tin Quach.
And your date and place of birth.
I was born on July 15th, 1982, in Saigon, Vietnam.
And can you describe your childhood and tell me about your family?
My father is a veteran, and he served in the Army of South Vietnam. And as my childhood, I remember, I left Vietnam when I was 3. But I do have fond memories of Vietnam. I was born in Saigon. I spent a large majority of my life actually in the countryside. It was in Thu Thơ. So I grew up on the rice paddies, so I remember running up and down the rice paddies, seeing the Mekong River. But I do remember that I was not allowed to go to school. It was because my father had served in the army. Mm-hmm. So because he was considered an enemy of the communist state, I was also an enemy. So I was denied school.
Have you been in the re-education camps?
My father, I believe, went to re-education camp for a day. Okay. And then when they found out he lost his arm and his leg and he couldn't do manual labor, they returned him.
So did your parents teach you at home? Try their best? Or?
Yeah, my parents tried their best to teach me at home. They snuck me into a preschool and kind of hid their identity. So I was in a preschool, and I remember when I was in preschool, the communist forces would come in and they would ask us what our parents did. And I remember as a little kid, I would be like, yeah, my dad's a soldier. And then these people would interrogate me and ask me what my dad did as a soldier. And I knew enough to not tell them that my dad fought for South Vietnam. So I said my dad fought for the Chinese. And they're like, oh, okay, good. And then I remember they would ask me where I lived, and I'm like, I don't know. So even as a little kid, I knew what I could say, what I couldn't say. Because if I said the wrong thing, we're all in trouble.
Was it hard for your parents to get jobs?
Yeah, my parents worked for a bakery, and they delivered bread, from home to home. So my parents had their education in law, but because the war ended in April 30th, 1975, my parents had worked for South Vietnam, and by the time the communist government took over, they couldn't, work their jobs anymore. So they ended up working for a bakery.
Wow. They were hard workers.
Yeah. So my dad lost his arm and his leg in the war, and he ended up walking up and down, the streets selling bread. So they worked pretty hard.
Very courageous. So how would you describe your mom?
Well, my mom is a little more timid. She's more humble. Mm-hmm. She took care of both my father and I. Mm-hmm. Very compassionate. So she chose to, love a man that's a veteran, and being anyone who's, I understand how hard it is to be around veterans.
How would you describe your dad?
Very courageous. My hero. He jumped on a grenade to save his NCOs, his soldiers. So it says a lot about his leadership.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What did your parents or your grandparents tell you about the French colonial presence in Vietnam?
Well, it's my parents and my grandparents. They were wise enough to only give me the facts, and they let me form my own opinions on Vietnam history. So, from what I know, starting in 1787, the French military had already conducted operations in Vietnam. They were invited by Emperor Yellow to come to Vietnam to fight for him against the Tay Sung. The Tay Sung, or known as the heroes of Vietnam, who defeated the Qing dynasty in China and established a national Vietnamese country. So Emperor Yellow asked the French to come to Vietnam, and by the 1850s, Saigon had already fallen to French colonial rule, and ever since then, it opened the floodgates to a French invasion. But the French colony also saw something positive out of it, which was the formation of Vietnamese nationalism, with the formation of the Cang Vương movement, which fought the French and tried to reestablish a Vietnamese dynasty, to Việt Nam Quốc Dân Đảng in 1929-1930 to establish a Vietnamese nationalist party.
What did your parents or grandparents tell you about the Ngo Dinh Diem government?
I actually was told a lot about the Ngo Dinh Diem government. I do know, and these are my opinions and not the opinions of my parents, that I felt Ngo Dinh Diem was the first president of Vietnam, but perhaps if he was more content with the title of Prime Minister of Vietnam, it might have been, the war would have turned out differently. Because if he would have been a Prime Minister under Emperor Bao Dai's reign, he would have been a Prime Minister of a united Vietnam, rather than taking a role and saying, I'm the first president of South Vietnam. So after 1954, Vietnam was divided in half, and the head of state was Emperor Bao Dai. He is the figurehead of Vietnam, an emperor of united Vietnam. And Ngo Dinh Diem ran an election against Emperor Bao Dai. The results of the election was Ngo Dinh Diem won 98.2% of the registered vote. It's impossible to win that much. The number of votes actually outnumbered the number of registered voters. So I believe he usurped the throne of Bao Dai, and I felt that North Vietnam and Central Vietnam didn't agree with that, because he took the emperor's rule away from the people, and he might have lost a lot of popularity that way. So Ngo Dinh Diem, although he made a lot of great reforms in Vietnam, he was the first president, and he tried as best as he could to bring democracy to Vietnam, but he also persecuted the Montagnard people, the Hills Tribes people. He had an oppressive government against the Buddhist majority, and an oppressive government against the Cao Dai and Wahao religions in Vietnam, which he lost a lot of popularity against.
What did you?
I felt that, and just my personal opinion, that the United States was best in Vietnam as a role as instructors, military instructors, as providing foreign aid, military, and supplies to Vietnam. But I felt that it was unnecessary to bring ground forces into Vietnam. I do appreciate and I do recognize the importance of air power and the U.S. Navy in Vietnam. Those were needed. But however, I don't feel that ground troops in Vietnam presented a positive outcome in the war. I felt that for the Vietnamese people in the north, they saw U.S. troops on ground as another invasion like the French, and which wasn't very popular with the North. So if the United States was, purely there for air power, Navy, and as instructors, the war might have been different.
What do you think of Operation Rolling Thunder, the bombing in North Vietnam?
Well, Operation Rolling Thunder is the longest continued bombing campaign in world history. Mm-hmm. I felt Operation Rolling Thunder, it was a conventional military strategy for an unconventional war. Operation Rolling Thunder wanted to bomb Vietnam back to the Stone Age. Vietnam was never an industrial country in the first place. So Operation Rolling Thunder tried its best to stop the production of North Vietnamese resources into South Vietnam. And the continued bombing didn't have much of an effect because North Vietnam was never industrialized. So you end up bombing cities and villages. There were no factories left to be bombed. And it was the conventional wisdom of the war at the time is if you fought a country like the Japanese government, where troops had uniforms and the country was industrialized and the army was mechanized, then yes, continued bombing of North Vietnam would have helped. But in the Vietnam War, it was not a conventional war. Vietnam was not the army was not mechanized, and I believe it wasted a lot of resources. But I also felt if you're gonna start, Operation Rolling Thunder and continue bombing North Vietnam, then you keep your plan and continue bombing North Vietnam until it surrenders, and not give up halfway.
You spoke a little bit earlier about your father's experience as a captain in the ARVN. Can you tell me how his experiences influenced you?
I always grew up around his battle buddies, his army friends. I always heard these courageous stories of soldiers. Growing up, I guess I always knew I was going to be a soldier. I didn't know it at the time, but I always knew I would. I love the camaraderie that they have. I remember when we first came to the United States, it was all about his battle buddies. Like, when we came to California, we didn't have a place to stay. His battle buddies gave us a place to stay. And then when we had our own apartment, my dad would have people from Vietnam come to stay at our place until they found their own place. And they kept on going.
It's a lot of loyalty and generosity. So what year did you come to the U.S.?
I came here in July 1st, 1986.
Mm-hmm. And did you spend time in a refugee camp before that?
Yes, I spent time in a refugee camp in Thailand.
In Thailand? Where in Thailand?
Oh gosh, I was 3. I wasn't too keen on geography at the age of 3.
Do you have any memories of the camps?
I do remember the refugee camps. Oh god, it rained a lot in Thailand. There's a lot of raining. I remember everything leaked in Thailand. We would be in a room and we watched this Bruce Lee movie, right? And we're all huddled in this little room. And we're packed to capacity. And the TV was really small. And I couldn't see anything, but I could hear people talking through the TV. And I remember the roof was leaking. I remember every morning we'd get up in the line, and we'd wait for water because there was a pump, and everyone would have a bucket. And you'd all wait in this line to get a bucket full of water. And even though we had nothing, we shared everything. I guess I was 3. I guess there was another girl. She was 6. Never knew her name, but she had 2 grapes, and she gave me one. So that was awesome.
Gosh. So, tell me about your decision to join the U.S. military, and when did you do that?
Gosh, I think in 2009. So I enlisted in the California State Military Reserve. So I'm a reserve soldier for the state of California. I guess I've always wanted to be like my father. So, but in another sense, I've always wanted to serve.
So, tell me about becoming the Soldier of the Year in 2010.
Well, I was brand new. I was brand new into the unit. I didn't really know anything. And our first sergeant at the time, he walked over and whispered in my ear, and he goes, "You're gonna be Soldier of the Year." And at the time, I was like, "Well, first sergeant, this is my second drill. I don't really know anything about the military yet." He goes, "Don't worry about it." So, I was nominated to compete for it, and oh man, I was scared. Like, I didn't know anything about the military. I could barely get my beret to fit on my head straight. But that was my objective. That was my goal. I would run miles a day to get fit. You know, I trained in combatives. I had to learn everything about marksmanship and Army history and combat lifesaver skills, world history. So yeah, it was quite a feat.
What did it mean to you, that?
It humbled me. It humbled me in the sense that I've never been deployed, and all the other soldiers who were candidates, you know, they had deployments under their belt. They had a lot more time in service than I did. So it really humbled me, and it showed me how the military could really change my life.
So, what did it mean to have your dad there at that ceremony?
Oh, it's great. It was like me telling him, hey, you know, I didn't mess up. I didn't even tell my parents that I was going for Soldier of the Year. I was just, hey, you know, I'm going to Northern California. I'm flying away in a uniform, but I'll be back. We're on some training exercise. I didn't tell them because I figured, you know, if I won Soldier of the Year, then I'd come home and I'd tell them. It'd be great. If I lost, I wouldn't tell anybody, and it would be great. So, but it was great to tell them, hey, you know, make me happy.
When did you become a U.S. citizen?
I think I became a U.S. citizen in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in elementary school, and I remember my parents telling me, hey, you're a U.S. citizen today. And to me, at the time, I felt like, is that what I want? Because am I losing out on my Vietnamese heritage by giving away my citizenship as being a Vietnamese, you know, person? But I realized, and I've been in the United States forever now. You know, I'll watch Saturday morning cartoons and eat cereal for breakfast. So I guess being American wasn't so bad, and I actually come to appreciate being an American citizen. Because, hey, you know, I'm in first grade. Awesome. In Vietnam, I wasn't even allowed to go to school. So it was pretty cool. I remember what I did when I became an American citizen. I was in first grade, but we had French fries. So
Celebrate.
yeah, that was my thing. I guess we went to.
You've been back to Vietnam.
Yeah, I've been back since.
When did you go?
I went back when I was in junior high.
How was that for you?
I came back during Vietnam's Independence Day, or the Communist government's Independence Day, and it was a huge culture shock when I came back. I remember when I was at the airport, and my parents kept on telling me about all this corruption in Vietnam and how bad the communists were, but I left when I was 3. So when I came back, I remember I met the Vietnamese customs, and they asked for money, and I'm like, well, here's my passport. He goes, yeah, I know, I see your passport. Where's your money? And I'm like, what money? What are you talking about? Here's my passport. My mom's all like, give him $10 and he'll let us through. And I'm like, I see how it is. I gave him $10. And I remember security in Vietnam. Wow. Walking through customs in Vietnam was a guy, you know, wearing green pajamas with an AK-47. Like, that was new. You know, I know what guns are, but I've never seen, like, people walking up and down, you know, the streets with an AK. Like, I guess that's what an oppressive government looks like.
How were you treated while you were there?
The first thing we had to do was we showed up to my grandfather's village, and then we checked in. We checked in with the local authorities, and they asked me a bunch of questions like, why are you here? Where are you from? What your dad did? Was he a soldier? And I'm like, yeah, he fought the Chinese. So there was a lot of questions, and I realized, like, wow, this government really keeps track of its people, where they go. And when we went, you know, to Saigon, my relatives had to check in with the local authorities and say, hey, we're going on vacation. You know, here's my permit. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I need a permit to travel 20 miles down the road. So,
Was there something you had missed about Vietnam? I know you were very young, but that you were looking forward to doing or seeing when you first went back?
Yeah, I wanted to see where my mom grew up, and I wanted to see my grandfather's homeland. So we went back to the farm. We got to see the rice paddy. Got to see the Mekong Delta. And I got to see where my ancestors were buried.
It's pretty special.
Yeah.
So, is there something that you would like to add or something you'd like to say?
No.
Is there something I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked you?
I don't know. We're gonna ask me something. I guess you can ask me how I'm doing now.
How are you doing now?
I'm doing great, thank you. Actually, I guess my life kind of changed after I won Soldier of the Year. So there was an author, Mr. Mark Yabanka. He interviewed me for Soldier of the Year. And one of the questions he asked me was, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I don't know. I'm fine the way I am. I thought I was growing up already, and now I felt like, you know what? I'm just gonna throw out social worker. I'm gonna be a social worker. How about that? Sound good on paper? He goes, yeah. So he puts it on paper, and the next thing I knew, I showed up on my military base on drill, and I see this newspaper with my face on it everywhere. And everyone in my units called me out, and they were like, hey, you're gonna go to graduate school and be a social worker? And I was like, yeah. So I just kind of agreed with it and played along. And I was thinking like, hey, whatever, it'll play through, and I can go on with my life. And then I realized the military really wanted to push me to go to school. And the military connected me with another soldier in my unit, Sergeant Mammon. He was a social worker, and next thing I knew, I was an intern with him, and we worked in a homeless shelter in LA. I was thinking like, oh great, now I'm at this internship for free. And then the military guided me to get a scholarship, which is the National Guard, the Army National Guard Educational Assistance Award, which paid for my college. And I guess when I said I wanted to be a social worker, I wasn't really thinking too hard, but next thing I knew, I was applying to USC to be a social worker, because I told everyone I was going to be a social worker now. So, and when I applied to USC, they asked for supplemental, files, attachments, and what I could send, and I was like, well, I guess my GPA is not that great. I might as well send in that Soldier of the Year article again and see what happens. And I got into USC, so I've been going to graduate school there for a master's in military social work.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And my internship, I wanted to work with veterans, so I applied to the VA in Los Angeles. And when I showed up to the VA for my interview, I was thinking like, oh, it wouldn't be that bad. I'm service connected. I'm cool. I walked into a room with like 60 social workers, and I'm like, oh, I'm so done. I better pull out that article with Soldier of the Year and stick that into supplemental attachments so I can at least have a chance. So I had my interview at the VA, walked out feeling totally defeated. I was like, that's it. I'm going to work in the homeless shelter again, which there's nothing wrong with. I really enjoyed it. But I got a letter from the VA, and then they accepted me as an intern, which was awesome, and it's a paid internship. And they even gave me a stipend, so it really, I guess being in the military really changed me.
Because it changed you in what ways?
It really opened the doors to my future. So, being Soldier of the Year really opened doors to a lot of things for me. But it made me humble. It taught me what it would be to be a leader, to be an NCO, and sacrifice and service.
So like, in giving back. I like how you're helping the veterans now too. So I think it's full circle.
3 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for this interview. And I'm sorry we were short on time and I had to cut out questions, but it's been an honor and a privilege. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
And good luck with everything.
Thanks.